Imagine you're home alone. It's late at night and you hear a knock at the door. You reluctantly get up to the door to look through the peephole to see who is there. On the other side, you see rather one or two little kids. They knock again and you open the door. The kids have their heads down and they quietly ask, "Can we come in and use your phone? We're lost." Well, do you suddenly have a sense of dread or overwhelming fear? If you do, don't look at their eyes.
Baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird.
I've heard stories of the BEKs over recent years. Some of them are just downright creepy. I'm a bit sensitive. I do my best to be aware and focus, so when or if I'm in danger or loved ones are in danger, my intuition goes on red alert. With that being said, I'd like to share something interesting. During the most recent New Year's Eve, my son, myself, and my fiance had quite a night at home. We watched the movies, made dinner. My son went to bed fairly early since he was only 5 years old. No wild party. We were marathon watching Netflix while laughing and chatting in the master bedroom, well after midnight, at which point there was a confident yet creepy solid knock at our front door. We live in the county, and it's a bit remote. All of our neighbors were friendly enough, but they wouldn't have been knocked at that late as it would be perceived as rude. Our Jeep was parked in the garage, so it wouldn't be related to a car having lights left on, etc. I'm listing this because that happened once. The keys to the Jeep in the house were securely hung in place. The fun time we were having quickly shifted to an odd feeling of confusion, coupled with unusual terror. It was really odd. We aren't fearful people. We simultaneously checked our phones up for anyone stopping by unannounced. Nothing except a few well-wishing friends texted due to it being New Year's Eve and all. I got up to stretch and my fiancé made sure I wasn't about to answer the door. "Hell no," I said. We laughed uncomfortably. I joked with him, saying, "'Cause you're going to." I teased, and he scowled and then smiled, knowing full well he would have normally. Why were we so on edge? We both remarked how odd we felt about the knock and the late hour. In fact, we didn't budge from the master bedroom. Neither of us felt good about checking the door and figured whomever it was had the wrong house. 2 to 3 minutes passed, then there's another knock. We were getting agitated, and that a strange feeling of terror was back, strong as ever. I've never felt that way about someone knocking on the door before, nor have I not felt safe to answer. It was really odd. I'll paint a more clear picture. Good neighborhood, our front porch light bulb needed to be replaced, so it was dark as hell out there. I thought it was really weird that someone would be standing out there in complete pitch black darkness for 3 minutes, knocking like that. I mentioned this to my fiancé. The peephole would give us away if we stole a look, since the lights were on throughout the house. We didn't dare check. Why? That is a senseless feeling of fear was disabling. It made it so two grown, very capable at defending ourselves adults were essentially cowering in fear after 2 knocks at the front door late at night. What gives? It took about a half hour, but I eventually felt a lot better. No longer felt afraid, and that whomever it was had left. I checked the front of the house throughout the kitchen windows. No cars, no neighbors, no parties, just the calm sound of crickets. I proceeded to open the front door after listening to make it absolutely certain no one would surprise me, like a drunk ex-boyfriend passed out on the front porch or something. Equally hilarious. Satisfied, I opened the front door. It was quiet. In fact, too quiet. No crickets, no sound at all. That's odd, I thought. I had a feeling instantly of being watched. From where? Who? What? I got the chills and shut the door. then armed the alarm system. I thought to myself, if they had come back, we can call to report suspicious activity to the police. However, it then occurred to me that we wouldn't get through. It was New Year's Eve after all. Awesome, right? Even to me, it sounds like I'm overly paranoid and getting spooked for no reason. I would think the same thing had it not happened to me when the second knock took place. For a split second, I thought, oh shit, what if? Regarding the black-eyed kids stories I've read. Mainly it was the remarkable senseless fear we felt that tipped me off. My son slept through it. No, I didn't share this epiphany with my fiance at the moment. We were too terrified to make any noise. He legitimately is a skeptic. He doesn't know anything about the black-eyed kids and wasn't about to go into it at the time. He shared that there was no way in hell he was answering the door, and I thought his reaction was odd, especially since he didn't know any black-eyed kid stories. During this ordeal, the doorbell wasn't used at all. What's strange, though, is that the only light in the porch area would have been the illuminated button for the doorbell. Why wasn't the doorbell pushed? No porch light out there. It had burned out. It was at a height at which it needed a ladder to reach it. During the busy holidays, we hadn't gotten around to replace the light bulb yet. It was on our list of to-do things. It was moved to the top of the list after this experience. It was super late at night. Also, I've lived here for 8 years. As an example, the only time our front door was ever knocked on super late at night was a friendly neighbor letting us know months back that I had left my truck open once when we had unloaded groceries. He announced himself as he was knocking, saying who he was and why he was knocking, before we even reached the door. Back then, we were grateful for his concern, and that was the only time that it had happened. It's a good neighborhood. What's interesting is that with my previous knowledge of black-eyed kids, that occurred to me during this experience, so I stayed put. There was no way I was going to check who was out there, just to be certain. It's super important to express that the immense fear I felt was paralyzing. I truly felt for anyone who has had the displeasure of experiencing black-eyed kids. If that isn't what was on the porch, then it was something equally as terrible. It's also important to share this tidbit. I'm not a person who's normally fearful of much. Honestly, there is a danger in just about everything, however, that doesn't stop me from daily adventures, and I'd rather enjoy life than live in fear. I'm a streetwise female who is always aware of her surroundings, as well as I'm a survivor of a home invasion too. Interestingly enough, when someone tried to rob me years prior, they were discovered in my kitchen when I was getting a quick glass of water before bed. We hadn't been home for even 2 minutes. I kept the bread in the fridge to keep cold filtered water. When I opened the fridge, the light illuminated the kitchen well enough so I could see a man standing in my kitchen corner. As unnerving as that was, I wasn't afraid. If I kicked in versus flight. All I did was look straight at this man and say, "Get out." I walked towards him with a purpose and he fled. I wasn't harmed. He ran from the house. My then boyfriend, back then it was someone I dated a few years ago, was amazing at my bravery. I've been trained in self-defense and have taken martial arts for years. So there you have it. Sometimes people fall on hard times to take desperate measures to rob others, and that basically was someone looking to rob a house that they thought was empty. I surprised them and they fled. With this experience that I've described, my instincts were going nuts. It was so terrifying that I wanted to share this story with the community as a helpful way to warn others. If you have someone or something knocking late at night and is followed by a similar feeling of overwhelming dread, simply trust yourself. Don't go near the door, nor could I, no matter what. That dreadful feeling was so pronounced. Our instincts are there to keep us safe, so trust that feeling. It's there to keep you all safe. Don't second guess yourself. We've since installed a security camera and restored the porch light.
Baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird.
Before you read this, I have to tell you how I feel about these stories. I haven't believed in the paranormal since high school. I never even heard Black-Eyed Kids until Reddit. These stories were always just entertainment for me, and I took them as fiction even though they're all supposedly true. I found myself stuck on the Black-Eyed Kids stories because they seemed the most unusual to me, and I enjoyed a fresh change of pace over the regular ghost story. I feel very guilty for what I'm about to tell you all, because I fear that reading these stories is why it happened to me. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. It's only my knowledge from reading Black-Eyed Kids stories on Reddit that I feel saved my life last night. There is no history of mental illness in my family, and I have never been drunk or taken any mind-altering substance. In fact, the strongest thing I've ever had is ibuprofen. I feel that many of you will discount my story if I don't make you aware of this. Also, I want to add that I will not be answering your questions or even rereading what I am writing right now. This is a throwaway account, and I must use it to warn you all of the Black-Eyed Kids, and I will never speak of this again, although I fear I may be driven to madness through my paranoia, even as I write this story at my brother's house with the lights on while he plays Call of Duty. Last night was like any other night. I was switching between listening to music and watching YouTube videos with one headphone in, so I can hear my infant daughter if she cries. That was the way my wife can get a full night's sleep. She works at 4 a.m. in the hospital every single day. When I decided to go lay down in the spare bed in the baby's room, just as I dozed off, I heard a thumping coming from the front porch. Startled at first, I opened my eyes wide and scanned the room. Realizing it was most likely my cat scratching himself on the front porch, I dozed back off. Then again, the thumping came back. Damn cat! I got out of bed to run him off of the front porch, only to see he wasn't there anymore. Now that I was up again, I wasn't the least bit tired. I figured I'll just go get some tea and check Facebook while I'm up. Maybe finish the web series I was watching on YouTube. A few minutes into the video, I felt the sudden urge to look up at the kitchen window. And there they were. The tops of two short-statured people's heads cresting the stairs just above my window frame. The people were just short enough to not see in the window, but I could see out. I heard no footsteps on my front porch as my stomach turned, but the knock. The knock was a steady, hollow thump. The very same thump I had just blamed on my cat. Deciding it was best not to answer, I showed my laptop and crept up by the door back to the baby's room. I assumed it was some of the people from the low-income housing across the road from me that were high or hiding from the cops, or maybe looking for my cousin who stays with me often and has many friends over there. The last thing I needed was to try to explain to two stoners that I was trying to sleep, even though it was at 2 a.m. It wasn't until I got into my daughter's room that the creepiness set in. The thump had moved from the kitchen to the bedroom windows. Both windows. A room apart, thumping in a perfect time. These stoners were going to wake up my daughter if I didn't run them off now. Pissed off, I went out to the kitchen, unlocked the door, ready to run around to the side of the house and kick some little idiot's ass. It happened then. Standing there, looking up at me, were two 10 or 11-year-old boys. The feeling of dread and the smell of mold almost made me vomit. The smaller of the two then spoke. "May we use your telegraph?" Huh? I just stared blankly at these boys, horrified of what I then realized. Their eyes were pitch black. He asked again to use my telegraph. There wasn't a sound to be heard. No crickets chirping, no dogs barking, no cars driving by, nothing. I tried to play it cool and ignore the fact that he didn't say a telephone or phone or cell, anything that would have made any sense of the situation, and calmly replied, "I don't have services at my house. Sorry." The expressions on their faces turned to rage as I finished my sentence. Swiftly I shut the door and locked it as quickly as I could, then stumbled back to protect my daughter. I picked her up from her crib and held her close. The fact that she didn't wake up freaked me out the most, but I managed to gather my senses enough to make sure she was still breathing and warm. Everything seemed okay with her. The thumping on the windows was back. I dropped to the floor as close to the wall as I could and held my little girl in my arms and wept like a child. I felt helpless and afraid. I lied there for what felt like hours and hours, crying and shaking until I heard it, my wife's alarm clock. The thumping has stopped at the instant the alarm went off, and I crept into the master bedroom with the baby. "What's wrong with you?" my wife asked. "I just had a bad dream, is all," I could mutter out. "Okay, well, give me the baby so I can feed her before work." I handed my wife the baby, and she fed her like any normal day. I turned on every light in the house and made coffee for her. For some reason, just having her awake it calmed my nerves enough to pretend like nothing happened. I walked her out to the car nervously with the baby in my arms. I asked her not to leave until I walked back into the house. She was put off by the request, but did so to humor me. Once I was safely in the house, I locked the door again, and in the house I sat horrified until she got home. I insisted we go to the next town over and stay the weekend at my brother's house. And here I sit horrified while she sleeps in the guest bedroom with my daughter, wondering why they stopped when the alarm went off. I think I know the answer. I was aware of BEKs, and she wasn't. Every story I've read about them is from someone who already knew about them. Maybe, just maybe, knowledge of them existing is the only reason they visit.
Baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird.
So me and my friend are walking around my neighborhood at night because we were really bored, and we passed this park that's in my neighborhood. Yeah, we heard singing. So we looked over at the park and saw a little girl all alone sitting on a swing. She had long brown hair, a pink polka dot dress, and a red bow in her hair. We couldn't see her super well at first because the park wasn't super well lit, so we kept walking past the park because we felt this overwhelming fear when we saw her without any cause. But as we were walking, still looking at her, she turned her head and stopped singing. She was singing Ring Around the Rosie. Me and my friend, even more scared, were walking a bit faster at that point, but I felt drawn to her. Even though I had this overwhelming fear, I also felt like I should go to her. But I fought that and I kept walking. She then stood up from the swing and started walking. When she walked out towards the street, which we were on the other side of, she went under the street light, and then I saw it. I made a clear eye contact with her, and her eyes were pitch black. She then started to run towards us, which only my friend noticed it because I was caught up in looking at her eyes. So my friend grabs my arm, pulls me, and yells, "Book it." So we start running as fast as we can down the street, and once we got to my porch and my mom came outside, we turned around and she was gone. After that, I had a sleep paralysis of her just standing in my room, staring at me with her dark eyes. I had a dream about her, and I always felt some sort of a presence around me, but I never actually saw her out there again. But anytime I'm outside at night, I always feel an extremely strong fear of seeing her again.